Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We are thrilled to bring back the Historic Artist Homes and Studios virtual road trip for its second season. We have a very special series of presentations planned for you over the coming months with 6 participating artist home sites, including the Wharton Esherick Museum, where we will begin our virtual road trip today. The Historic Artist Homes and Studios virtual road trip is a collaboration between the James Castle House, located in Boise, Idaho, and the Historic Artist Homes and Studios program, which is a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We launched this program in response to a recently published guide to historic artist homes and studios, written by Valerie Balint, the program manager of HAHS. As we all looked out our windows over the last few years, perhaps longing for an escape, we had maybe dreamed of a road trip taking us to new and unfamiliar places. Valerie's book provided us the perfect jumping off place for this adventure. The virtual road trip became the next best thing. As we traveled last year, west to east, we visited with site directors, curators, collection managers, and artists. Each stop offered us a glimpse into spaces, places, studios, and stories that we had only dreamed of gaining access to, and this year we're doing it again. My name is Rachel Reichert, and I'm the program director at the James Castle House here in Boise, Idaho, located on ancestral and unceded territory of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute people. Staff at the James Castle House will be your guide over this 6-month journey. I'm also joining you from inside the James Castle House, making this location your bonus stop along the way. Behind me is a incredible collection of James Castle's drawings and constructions inside the space he called home for over 4 decades. I encourage you to learn more about our fabulous museum here in Boise, Idaho, with some links in the chat we'll share later. Today with me is Valerie Balint, the program manager of the Historic Artist Homes and Studios. Hello, Valerie.
Hi, Rachel.
Along with Julie Siglin, the executive director of the Wharton Esherick Museum, and Holly Gore, the director of interpretation and research. We also have Andrew Sanders, who will be providing ASL interpretation today. Before we get started, I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. We are committed to making this program accessible and are integrating accessibility through American Sign Language interpretation and English language captions. Captions are available by clicking on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen, then selecting Show Subtitle. We strongly encourage your questions throughout this presentation, so please send your questions to us through the Q&A box. We will answer as many as we can at the end of today's presentation. This event is being recorded and will be made available online in the coming weeks. You will be able to find this and other recordings from the HAHS road trip on the James Castle House YouTube channel. And at the end of this presentation, we will also be adding links for finding our previous road trip events, websites, mailing lists, and additional contact information for all of us. So for those of you just learning about the Historic Artist Homes and Studios program, also referred to as HAHS, this again is a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which currently is a coalition of 55 museums that were previously homes and working studios to many American artists. Through their support and advocacy, HAHS is helping to preserve the nation's legacy of creativity in the visual arts. This program aims to connect meaningful visitor experiences at authentic creative places. All HAHS sites are public spaces in which I hope we can actually all venture out into the world and visit these incredible museums in person, many of which are open now. I also highly recommend visiting HAHS online to learn more about these sites and many other homes and studios they support. You can learn more at artisthomes.org or engaging with them on various social platforms. Because this is a virtual road trip, I would like to set the stage just a bit and offer a few travel notes for us to consider before we get started. The Wharton Esherick Museum lies just outside of Malvern, Pennsylvania, which is roughly 28 miles west of Philadelphia. After flying into Philly and securing a trustworthy vehicle for your road trip, You will either take the interstate for a swifter arrival, or you will perhaps meander on quieter roads as cityscapes melt into more forested landscapes and farmland. From here, I would love to invite Valerie to share with us her experience both visiting the area and the Wharton Esherick Museum. Fun fact about Valerie, she has not done this specific road trip, but she has had the opportunity to visit nearly all HAHS sites and of course, many other wonderful museums. Valerie?
Thank you, Rachel, to you and everyone involved at the James Castle House for spearheading the virtual road trip in collaboration with Historic Artists Homes and Studios. I'm excited to have us begin this year's series with an artist whose talents extend to so many forms of art making, all culminating in the total artwork that is the property we will be introduced to today. I will personally never forget the first time I saw an Esherick piece of furniture in the home of a private collector almost 20 years ago. I was struck by its beauty and its grace, the surface texture, which I can only describe in not artistic terms as yummy. That's the way I think of his surfaces. Having not known of this artist, I now needed to learn more. And I reached out to a friend of mine, a hobbyist artisan woodworker, who exclaimed incredulously, "How can you not know this artist?" And I was immediately indoctrinated into the widespread circle of Esherick fans among those who work in wood today. My appreciation has only grown over ensuing decades. I would urge all who set off on a journey to learn about Esherick that they make a stop in Philadelphia at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, one of the institutions where the artist studied. Founded in 1805, it is the first and oldest art museum and art school in the United States. The Academy, which you see on screen, is a polychromed confection outside with grand interiors, which warrant their own exploration beyond the artworks that grace these prestigious walls. The museum has several works by Esherick in their collection, such as this sculpture and this print at upper right, although they are not currently on view. Traveling from Philadelphia out to Esherick's former home is to journey along what is known as the main line, either by car or by rail. Originally named for the rail line created by the Pennsylvania Railroad, it is now the popular term for a series of affluent suburbs that grew up along this western corridor, all which boasted the Gilded Age estates and country houses of Philadelphia's captains of industry. Elite clubs like the Marion Cricket Club, seen at upper left, still operating, embodies the long-standing cultural ethos of this area. Each town along the main line has its own character, its main street attractions, and they are all worth exploring. Several towns lay claim to some of the most prestigious liberal arts colleges and preparatory schools in the nation. Campuses like Bryn Mawr at lower left are worth the stroll, even if you are not on a whirlwind college exploratory tour. Some of these impressive estates are also now open as public museums, such as Appleford in Villanova, seen at center, an early Pennsylvania farmhouse on 24 acres. Of course, these estates still come on the market today. At upper right, a current listing in Wayne, Pennsylvania, built in 1892 at 8,000 square feet and 2.75 million, in case you're in the market. And then the last stop on the main line is none other than Malvern, the town where we will take our virtual journey today. While visitors to Malvern can seek adventures at the nearby American Helicopter Museum or intriguing Treehouse World, the area in which Esherick's site lies is steeped in Revolutionary War history. Likely you all remember the tales of George Washington's brutal winter spent with his troops at Valley Forge in 1777. And just a few miles from the Esherick Museum, you can visit this extensive national park, taking either a trolley ride or a walking tour with a park ranger, and view the impressive arch, which you see at lower left, marking the Continental Army's arrival here. But the park also offers more than 30 miles of trails for hiking or cycling, You can pack a picnic or fish, canoe, or kayak on one of two waterways that runs through this park. While Valley Forge may be a place we all remember from our elementary school history classes, likely less familiar is another site associated with the fight for national independence, the Paoli Historic Battlefield. Here, the British led a surprise attack on a continental encampment under the charge of General Anthony Wayne. The battle became known as the Paoli Massacre, and as early as 1817, it was already being commemorated by surviving revolutionary soldiers, and it's the second oldest Revolutionary War memorial in the entire nation. If you're looking for a traditional house museum experience and to learn more about said General Anthony Wayne, you can take a tour of his preserved home, originally built in 1724. And after your tour, drink, eat, and be merry, or even stay the night at the Warren Tavern, whose history dates back to the pre-revolutionary era. If you are desiring a totally different type of sensory experience, I would suggest you travel about a half-hour south to Longwood Gardens and immerse yourself into the sense and profusion of this 1,000+ acre garden that has been open almost continuously since the 18th century. But if you are in need of more HAHS immersion, and who isn't, just 10 minutes from Longwood is the Brandywine River Museum of Art and Conservancy, which tours the homes and studios associated with illustrator N.C. Wyeth and his talented family of artist children, most famous Andrew Wyeth. Perhaps stop for a tasting at the Chadsford Winery while you are en route to Longwood, or take a little bit of a detour out of Malvern to Westtown Amish Market and stocked up on delectable bites like Amish whoopie pies, Pennsylvania Dutch pretzels, and apple fritters. This 25,000 square foot emporium also features other goods like traditional Amish furniture. While certainly incredibly different than Esherick's, these pieces are also beautifully crafted. Traveling on small country roads set against the backdrop of endless acres of farm fields, the sight of an Amish or Mennonite horse buggy is a common occurrence. If you want to learn more about this culture, travel west versus south from Esherick and into the heart of Amish country, Lancaster, about an hour drive. Visit the Amish Farm and House Museum, opened actually in 1955, or journey into the center of Lancaster town to visit the HAHS site, the Charles Demuth Museum, boyhood home of modernist Charles Demuth, and the tobacco shop owned by his family for more than a century. If you are still craving even more artist spaces in Pennsylvania, instead of traveling south or west from the Esherick Museum, set off an hour north to the tiled extravaganza that is Henry Mercer's Font Hill in Doylestown. Every site within HAHS is a gem, and it's wonderful that so many sites are within easy driving distance of each other within Pennsylvania. But the Wharton Esherick Museum is unique as a total work of art. It is an immersion into texture and form and the honeyed, warm surface of wood, lovingly crafted by the hands of a virtuoso. Even the most functional objects in this site are works of art. From the smallest spoon to the grander scale of the building, all are integrated into a cohesive environment and vision of space. It's one thing to marvel, as many do, me included, at a piece of Esherick furniture on a platform in a museum exhibition, or one of his masterful prints on a white wall. But it's something else entirely to see these items in dialogue with each other in the space for which they were designed and in a domestic setting. This season on the road trip, we are focusing on artists who actively designed their living and workspaces and who worked in multiple disciplines throughout their career, moving seamlessly from 2 to 3-dimensional works of art and constantly evolving their practice. And this is just as James Castle did actually throughout his career. I can think of no better place to begin than with the story of and personal environment created by Wharton Esherick, and my sincere thanks to our hosts, Julie and Holly, and to you, Rachel, as we venture into this magical place.
Thank you, Valerie. Or am I next or is Rachel next? I think I'm next. Thank you, Valerie, for that introduction. My name is Julie Siglin. I'm the director of the Wharton Esherick Museum. We're a founding member of HAHS, by the way, and we're really thrilled today to be a part of this program. I've been with the museum since 2016, and I've had the opportunity to visit a number of HAHS sites and convene with colleagues from the network, and it's robust and wonderful, and we're happy to be a part of this road trip program today. So Holly is going to talk to you more about Wharton's biography and some of the information about the studio and why the museum is here. I'll just start by saying we opened in 1972, in fact, in September of 1972. So this year marks our 50th anniversary. And our, like most HAHS sites, our mission is to preserve and share the legacy and artwork of Wharton Esherick, which in our case starts with the exterior walls of buildings, and as Valerie said, goes right down to the hand-carved spoons in the drawers. Wharton is known primarily as an artist who worked in wood, creating furniture, sculpture, and sculptural objects, both functional and decorative. But he was really a foundational figure in many disciplines that make up American modern design and American art history writ large. So we're going to introduce you to some of those objects and places today. I'm going to introduce Holly Gore, who's going to take that part away. Holly joined our small staff last fall after completing her doctorate in the history of art and architecture at UC Santa Barbara. I first met Holly here at the Wharton Esherick Museum in 2015 when she was writing an undergraduate thesis on Wharton. So when we connected over her joining our team, I was of course overjoyed. And I'm very excited to turn it over to her to have her tell you a little bit more about Wharton today. So Holly.
Thanks so much, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as Julie introduced, Wharton Esherick was an American artist, designer, and craftsperson. He lived from 1887 until 1990 and is really best known for his furniture. So the designs that I'm showing here, the three-legged stools and the music stand, are from the 1950s and 60s, and they're really representative of a work for which Esherick is most widely celebrated. The music stand is probably Esherick's most recognized piece. He produced it in multiples, and they're in museum collections all around the country, including the Wharton Esherick Museum, where we have 2 iterations of music stand in the studio. So also in the studio are works by Esherick in other media that he worked in addition to wood furniture. So Esherick was an artistic polymath. He was a painter, a printmaker, ceramist, craftsperson, architect, and furniture designer at different times of his life. But in all of it, he kept the identity of an artist, and he stated repeatedly and firmly that he approached furniture making as a form of sculpture, but with the added consideration of how people would live with the objects that he made. I'll get back into his biography a little bit. Esherick was a Philadelphia native. He was raised in the western area of the city in a very affluent family. His household included his independently wealthy parents, himself, and 4 siblings. So here we have some scenes of the Esherick family in their 19th century upbringing. The photo of the kids on the bikes was taken in 1894, and Esherick is second from the left, and he's standing next to his twin sister Dottie, who's in the center. And then the photograph of the older group of people, which was taken 10 years later, shows the Esherick family on a camping trip in the Pocono Mountains, where they had a summer cottage. Esherick, again, is second from the left. And from a really young age, Esherick decided that he wanted to have a life for himself that was very different from the one he'd grown up with. He wanted to be an artist. And as a teenager, he convinced his parents that they should send him to the Philadelphia Central Manual Training High School, which they did. And he gained their experience with woodworking, blacksmithing, and drawing, kind of manual crafts. But interestingly, this curriculum was not intended as vocational training. It was not to produce carpenters and blacksmiths, but rather it was based in philosophies of progressive education that privileged learning by doing and through experience over sitting at a desk and reading books. So Esherick went on to have a professional art training. He studied painting in two places, the Pennsylvania Museum School of Industrial Art and the more prestigious Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. And I should mention that later in life, Esherick was very, very candid about the fact that his father had arranged for him to have a scholarship, a 2-year scholarship to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. And when he left that program 2 months shy of completing it, he really walked away from teachers and art education. It was the end of his formalized education and the beginning of developing his own form of painting, but also it was really a break from that kind of influence of his parents, although he would going forward have the benefit of family inheritance to get started and to buy land. But he would always, from there on, always his merits were always on his own work. His clients were not his parents' friends. So after college, Esherick worked briefly in commercial illustration. And around this time, he met a woman named Letty. The two married in 1912. And as newlyweds, Wharton and Letty Esherick decided that they would leave the city for the countryside, where they would live an artful life that was close to nature. And Letty was also a creative person. She was a dancer and a weaver. So with an inheritance from Wharton's maternal grandmother, they bought an 1830s farmhouse on Valley Forge Mountain. The location was ideal for them because it was rural, but not so remote as to be cut off from Philadelphia and all of the cultural happenings there that they wanted to participate in. It was a short carriage ride from the Paoli train station, which was the end of the main line, the commuter railroad that Valerie talked about. And so these archival photos show Wharton and Letty at their home, which they called Sunnycrest. The photo of the woman and the baby is Letty with their first child. And I think it's interesting to note that she's wearing an entirely homemade outfit. That's all of her sewing. And the dark cloth that she's wearing has a kind of light embroidered border around the neck and the sleeves and the hem, and that is all her embroidery, hand embroidery. And then in the photo of the two people, those are the Eschericks under an arbor that Wharton built, and they're standing beside a large garden that Letty tended. Letty grew peonies to sell as cut flowers and food to feed their growing. And so this homesteading, while very picturesque, had added urgency and weight, because all the while that the Eschericks were living together at Sunnycrest, Wharton was attempting to make a living as a painter, a profession that he was never able to really gain a footing in, though he tried to do so for the better part of 15 years. By the mid-1920s, Wharton Esherick had given up on painting in favor of working in other media, printmaking, furniture making, and sculpture. And at this time, he walked up the hill beside Sunnycrest and built himself a new studio, which gave him room to work, but also distance from his family, which had grown to include 3 children. So these archival photos that I'm showing here picture the studio in 2 of its early iterations. The sort of more yellowish photo that has 2 buildings in it, that shows the earliest version of the studio. It's in the background, the stone building. It's built of locally sourced sandstone. 1926 was the year he completed it. And it took the form of a Pennsylvania bank barn, but which Esherick had adapted to suit his own aesthetics and purposes. In the other photograph, you can see the studio as it looked in the 1940s. By that time, he and Letty had separated. He was living in the studio full time and had added an addition, a wood addition to the side of the stone studio, which he called the tower. Here showing a recent photograph of the studio that shows some of the later additions from the 1960s, a deck, and then also a concrete silo addition. That's what Esherick's term for it was, this painted concrete addition that you see in the foreground. That is made out of concrete block with stucco smoothed over it. And then the painting is a fresco, meaning that he put the pigment directly into the wet stucco. So during Esherick's lifetime, really all of his lifetime, the studio was an ongoing work in progress and really a labor of love and personal expression. So moving inside the studio, you can look at some of Esherick's paintings. On the red wall is a portrait of his daughter, Mary. The landscape painting that I'm showing is a recent bequest to the museum. It is not on view in the studio, but I'm showing it because it was really done at a pivotal moment in Wharton Esherick's career. The painting is of pine trees that he observed in a town called Fairhope in Alabama. And the Eschericks traveled to Fairhope in 1919 to 1920 because Letty Esherick was interested in a progressive school there. And she attended teacher training while their daughter Mary attended the school, and Wharton painted and was invited to exhibit his paintings there. He borrowed some woodworking tools to make frames and also started using those same tools to make woodblock prints. So you can see the painting is of tall pine trees in Alabama, and then around the border are these kind of pine needles. So looking at some of those prints in the studio, Esherick would display the printed pages, but also the carved printing blocks, which he would sometimes frame and hang up. And this kind of technique and interest in relief carving flows into the early furniture works. In the photo on the right, we have a drop front desk of 1925 to 27. This is carved in white oak. It's a very heavy, weighty arts and crafts style piece, really massive in person. Esherick left the signs of his own work visible by not smoothing out those chisel marks. And that's what I've tried to show in the details of these little cuts. Really, I think really very much he's making a declaration of, I'm an artist here working in nature with hand tools. And here we see the desk open. So not all of Esherick's early furniture works were so technically complex. Both of these chairs were made as multiples and designed for easy replicability. The chair with the dark colored woven seat and backrest is his Hessian Hills chair, which Wharton Esherick made. He made a set of these as a barter for his daughter Mary's tuition at the private progressive Hessian Hills school, another progressive school. And then the hammer handle chair, with the chair with the red seat. As the name indicates, the chair is fashioned from hammer handles. And he made a set of 30 of these for a small repertory theater nearby to his studio called the Hedgerow Theater. And this was done in barter for his daughter Ruth's acting lessons. And the Hedgerow was a really important place for Esherick because when he was getting started as a furniture maker, there were very few places to exhibit contemporary furniture. It just was not as popular as it is now. And so he often had his sculptures and furniture on display in the theater building, and that was one of the first places where he would connect with patrons. Esherick found a national stage for his work at the 1940 New York World's Fair. The room that I'm showing is called the Pennsylvania Hill House. He designed it in collaboration with architect George Howe, and almost everything in the room that is shown is actually on view in the studio. One notable exception is the dining set. Although we have one iteration of those chairs, we don't have those specific chairs. And one thing that was I find really fascinating about this set was that he used these kind of translucent rawhide seats that are really very lovely. And so I'm showing a different chair. The color photo is of a different chair in the studio with that same kind of seat, and just showing the real kind of tactile sensibility that Esherick had and really considering all these surfaces. And all the while that Esherick was doing furniture, he was also creating sculpture and many different kinds of sculpture. So the archival photo of the studio interior, which shows a carving of a standing woman. This was in the 1930s. And this was, the carving of the standing woman, which is called Essie, would have really fit very well with the definition of sculpture at that time. But some of these other pieces I'm showing maybe less so, because they weren't designed to be shown in an art gallery or a stately home, but really the more humbler settings of a garden or a kitchen or some kind of domestic space. So up above, we have a bird and an elephant. Those are Esherick's ceramic garden sculpture. Below them, a carved tankard. And then that little hanging figure is actually a lighthouse, not a light bulb pole. And throughout the studio, all of the light poles are these little tiny sculptures, as if there's no detail too small to be insignificant. So the idea of art as something to be lived with carries through in the really sculptural and evocative interiors of the studio. And for over 40 years, Esherick modified, expanded, sculpted, furnished, and painted the spaces to create a unique building that was really itself a work of art, an inhabitable artwork. And Esherick was able to do this in part because he had built a new workshop in 1956 to house his cabinet making enterprises and his furniture making and sculpture. And this 1956 workshop was a collaboration between Esherick and the architecture office of Louis Kahn, with significant contributions by architects Anne Ting and Dave Wisdom. And the color photo shows Wharton Esherick in the 1960s in front of his workshop. So at this point in his life, Esherick is coming into a new form of recognition. The American craft movement is picking up steam. Handcrafted modernist wood furniture is becoming popular, and it now has a name. It's studio furniture. And this new genre is fast professionalizing during the 1950s and 60s, leading to new gallery and retail spaces for exhibiting and selling craft, and also a lot of university level craft degree programs. And the photo, the black and white photo of the men sitting outside, this documents a moment when Esherick got some real late career recognition as kind of a new kind of a space for him. He was invited to the first national conference of the American Craft Council, and in an honorary capacity as an advisor on the discussion panels on wood. And what we're seeing in the photo, the meeting notes record that it was a nice day and they decided to have the meetings outside. And I should mention that the American Craft Council, ACC, still exists today, and much of the materials on this meeting is digitized, and you can just look at them on their website. It's really wonderful. And at this point, younger woodworkers started to seek Esherick out as a kind of ancestor to the work that they were doing. One of them was Wendell Castle, who sought out Esherick on several occasions. And the music stand we're seeing is Wendell's own music stand in conversation, the one that Esherick had made. And with that, I will pass it back to Julie, who will bring us back into the present.
Thank you, Holly. So Holly has been sharing a lot about the history of the site and the ways that the studio evolved as Wharton's life unfolded and changed along with his artwork, and how his personal relationships and collaborations really informed his creative approach. So I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about how we carry that spirit forward today that we offer at the museum. These personal stories are underlined in so many aspects of the site. We had a docent come in the other day to give a tour, took one look at the group and realized it contained his closest childhood friend who he hadn't seen in 30 years. Those kinds of things happen here a lot, but Wharton's work and the construction of the studio depended on those friendships and those relationships. And I want to share, first I want to share a quick video that gives you a little context of the exterior of the site. This site is a 12-acre campus. There's 5 structures, including 2 buildings currently open to the public, and some more that are going to come online in the future, which I'll circle back to. But this is what the studio looks like today. And Wharton was not an architect, though the site is a National Historic Landmark for architecture. So he did need help in the construction of the studio, which was done without drawings. The stones were laid and orientation and scale were decided as it was built. So to honor the people and the relationships that enabled the studio to come into existence, Wharton created these incredibly charming coat pegs, which you see on a tour here. This is a photo of all of the coat pegs grouped together, where you can come on, take your coat off and stay a while. And then if we go to the next slide, what I love about these is how very highly personal they are. Now, this is the bird that sang to them and kept them company. So maybe they didn't know that individual bird, but on the right is Bert Culp, who was the lead stonemason of the studio construction. And he's holding a block of stone, and he has his signature pork pie hat. In the next slide, we see someone named John Schmidt, who had a large influence on Esherick. John Schmidt was a furniture maker, very talented and traditional furniture maker, who was a big figure in Wharton sort of transitioning from two-dimensional works in wood to furniture and sculptural furniture. And I love this particular coat peg because it offers John holding a saw, which would have been his main tool of the trade. And you can see the teeth mark of the saw on the underside. And then in the next one, we see the two laborers who helped construct the studio. And again, these are very personal. The construction trades were segregated in the day. Aaron Coleman on the left was a Black man, so he would have had a specific number of jobs that he would do. And one of them was carrying the hod, which is depicted here. And then on the right is another gentleman who was a big, strong guy and would help carry the stones up. So these coat pegs are deeply charming, but they are very honorable of the people that they depict and how the studio did not come about with just Wharton, though he is shown in the next slide, orchestrating and overseeing the whole shebang. He's got his hammer and his chisel there. So the personal relationships really began and were pivotal with the studio with the founders, who were Wharton's middle daughter and her husband, Bob. I believe we have a picture of them on the right. Bob and Ruth purchased the site from Wharton near the end of his life when he was having some financial struggles so that he could live out his days here without concern. What you see on the left is the Lucan structure that Holly mentioned in its pretty much current day iteration. So Bob and Ruth determined the best way to operate a museum, they were unskilled and unpaid volunteers, was to live there. So they renovated the workshop into their personal home, and they gave the tours, they mowed the grass, they did all of the maintenance, and they were on-site security. And it was an absolute true labor of love for the both of them. So as I mentioned, they officially opened the doors of the museum in September of 1972, making this year our 50th anniversary. So to celebrate our 50th anniversary, we have a series of exhibitions and programs that are going to explore the idea of home in order to celebrate those personal relationships and how this site evolved as home and workspace, and how there was a lot of collapsing of what those definitions were for Wharton. And it's going to enable us to think creatively about the last 50 years and the next 50 years as we move away from the family as the primary drivers of the institution and hand the reins over, if you will, to the likes of Holly and Emily Zilber, our director of curatorial strategy, and what they will do with inviting contemporary artists to come in. Our regular annual museum activities include, this will be our 29th, if you could go back one, Holly. Thank you. This will be, that's okay, our 29th annual Juried Woodworking exhibition, where we invite artists to think about thematically what Wharton's influence means on them and their work. And what you're seeing here is an image from last year's first prize winner on the right, this beautiful cabinet by a woodworker with the etched glass. We also have done for a number of years a high school printmaking competition. In its early days, this started as woodblock printing, which is what Wharton's approach to printmaking would have been. We have now expanded that definition as long as printmaking is at the core. I'll say a quick hello to my friend Mary, who has some involvement in this program, and I know is on the program. And Mary would agree that the work that we get submitted from these high school students continually blows us away. And we really enjoy the opportunity to work with those local students and see how they take in the site and add it to their creative output. And we do virtual programs like the one we're doing today. By necessity in 2020, that began. But we have realized the value, as most organizations have. In 2020, we had almost a quarter of our in-person visitation join us via sweatpants and screens, and many of those people were new to us. So we continue a robust series of virtual programs in addition to our in-person tours and programs that we are putting on this year. We have also started to ramp up our work with contemporary artists. Last year, we offered our true first site intervention with a contemporary artist named Roberta Massacre. Roberta is an artist who lives and works in Philadelphia and is best known for her sculptural and functional work in ceramic, which is a material that Wharton would have dabbled in himself. We have some examples of that here. So Roberta was a fabulous choice for us because of those qualities of her work that blur the lines between sculpture and function. And in order to continue expanding our programs, we have been undergoing a campus planning process. The room I am sitting in, these are some images of some of the virtual programs and offsite exhibitions that we have begun to do in recent years. This is a woodworker that we did a virtual program with a couple of years ago. But the room I'm sitting in today to join you in is it was Wharton's garage that he built in 1928. It's 150 square feet, and it serves as our exhibition space, our sales desk, our store, and our public bathroom. So for that reason, and because we had reunited Wharton's original farmhouse home that Holly talked about with the campus a few years ago, we went through a planning process. And what you're seeing now is a conceptual rendering of what the campus will look like when hopefully we are able to go through a capital campaign process and add new construction. The process will offer us space that we don't have currently to do both educational programs, fundraising programs, and to continue our curatorial exploration with contemporary artists. But it will really serve us in distilling the experience that is the studio, the original workshop, and the garage down to what it was like when Wharton was here. So we'll be able to somewhat remove evidence of us as an administrative body from these spaces, take them down the hill, and so that when you are here, you will really have this sense of kinship with Wharton's time here and the work that's present. The idea is that it's not going to change very much, which is what made the campus plan such a strong product. Visitors to this site experience a domestic and intimate space. These are some images from our campus plan. That's a rendering of a new building. And then I think we have, these are some beautiful, I wanted to share these just because they're beautiful. The lead architect had done some conceptual sketches of what the new building would look like. And then I think, yes, so these are this is the program plan for the Lucan building on the site that Holly talked about, which we are very eager to share, and which you can start to get glimpses of if you're able to come here for a tour with some architecture topic tours. So the idea is that we will dig our heels in around this experience, which is this very intimate time where you experience every angle, surface, and object in the studio as a work of art. It was presented as it was when Esherick lived and worked here. We have changed very little except for the flow of traffic, perhaps. And it's an immersive and magical experience. It tends to prompt creative reflection on the part of our visitors who either reinvigorate or begin a new creative practice. And that can be an inspired dinner, that can be a piece of furniture or sculpture, can be a painting, whatever inspires that particular person. So it's my hope that even though you are all in various and far-flung places, that you will have a chance to come here to experience Esherick's house and the magical artwork inside, and have that sense of getting in touch with your own creative self. And I have one final image of Esherick that I love to share. Oh, this is just a little walkthrough into the main gallery. This is our main tour route when you come. You can see that it is crammed with artwork. I have over 8 years of interpreting this site, and I still see things that I never noticed before. And then I like to show this last image to conclude presentations of Esherick. I believe this is in his last year of his life. He has a rasp and he's working away at a piece of furniture, which was his driving life force. So thank you. And again, I hope you all have the chance to come here, and Wharton's door is open to you.
Thank you so much, Holly and Julie. It's so remarkable for those of us who can't be in the area and actually visit you in person to at least get a sense of the textures and patinas and kind of materials that are so special to your site. And some of those close-up details of like the coat hooks start giving us a sense of what that space feels like to be in person. I'm going to start us out with a question, and then we do have a few questions coming in here. So feel free to pop questions into the Q&A box or the chat, preferably the Q&A box, but I do see some coming into the chat. I'm so interested in the decision to leave the city and move into a more rural space and sort of be a part of a sort of more back to the land way of living and working, which feels like such a profound decision on the life and work of Wharton Esherick. Can you talk a little bit more about what led them to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, they were, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, they were not alone in doing this. There were a lot of other painters and artists and thinkers at the time who were really thinking that, you know, modernity should not look like the end of the 18th century. It should not look like the environmental degradation, the kind of factory labor that, you know, people like Karl Marx wrote about, that we needed to have something different. So there were a lot of painters living in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is just east of here. Esherick always said he couldn't afford that. Esherick had a really good friend, the painter and ceramist Henry Varnum Poor, who had a home in New York, also his own kind of rural artist's home. Esherick and I think Wharton and Letty Esherick were involved with people who were doing organic farming. I mean, organic was a big word in that time. It was the idea of reconnecting with the earth. It comes through in education. They went to the organic school in Fairhope. And so it was just like, it was in the water of them and all the people they were around.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to ask one more follow-up question. For those who are just learning about Wharton Esherick today, can you help give a sense as to kind of what his career kind of looked like and how or perhaps where people may be able to find his work outside of the Wharton Esherick site?
Well, I mean, if you're in Philadelphia, you can go to the Philadelphia Art Museum, and in the American wing, there is a fireplace surround and a door frame by Esherick. There are pieces in, design collections. A lot of them end up in design collections. I'm thinking Yale, Art Institute of Chicago, the James Michener Museum closer by. Most of what's in museums outside of the studio is going to be mostly furniture and some sculpture. If you want to see his paintings or his ceramics, though, the studio is the spot.
Awesome, thank you. So I have a question coming in, wondering where the Esherick's parents' wealth came from.
Holly, do you want that one?
You might know more than I do. I know that they were independently wealthy, and that Wharton said he never saw his father work. But I don't actually know. I know that they had wealth on both of his grandmothers were wealthy. So there were wealth on two sides of the family. Do you know more about that?
Not a whole lot beyond that.
Yeah.
Okay. A question about the woodworking competition. When and where is the woodworking competition?
Sure. So the annual Juried exhibition takes place here, though, again, because I'm in our 150 square foot exhibition space, we have revamped the model a little bit, which was also a sort of unexpected benefit of COVID. So we take the top 3 prize winners, first, second, and third place pieces, and we exhibit them physically here. The deadline this year was February 2nd, I believe. You can get on our mailing list or look at social media if you're interested in next year's iteration of that. And then the rest of the work that is juried into the show is available on our website in an online exhibition.
Thanks, Julie. I have a question here. Can you describe how this became a museum and how much of his art was a part of this at the onset?
Yeah. So the museum was being visited organically, I'll use that word again, by people who had found out about Esherick and were curious. So it formally became a museum. It was incorporated in 1971 by the daughter and son-in-law, and officially opened its doors in September of 1972. What changed? The answer is pretty easy, almost nothing, other than Bob and Ruth retrofitting his workshop into a residence. Within the studio, they maybe moved a sculpture or two to allow for better flow of people, but nothing beyond that was changed. It is presented exactly as it was when Esherick lived and worked here, with his dishes in the drawers, his clothes neatly folded in the drawers. I took care to ask his son-in-law if he was that tidy, because I was very curious to know, and the answer was yes. So the little scraps of paper and notes and ephemera are all Esherick's. We do not actively collect Esherick because we present the studio as a total work of art, and we have no storage and exhibition space currently. So we keep it intact, if you will.
It's such a remarkable thing to have a site like that. I'm, obviously at the James Castle House, and when we acquired the site, we had virtually nothing but the house.
Yeah.
So it's a very different experience.
Yeah, the Pollock Krasner farmhouse, I know I've talked to Helen a lot about that, but they got the structure and the personal belongings, but no artwork. So it's each of us is different in our own wonderful way.
Yep. So I have a question here. For those not acquainted with Wharton Esherick's philosophy, can you please explain his incorporation of nature and nature's quote lines in his work?
Wharton Esherick was I think he was very individualistic. He was very, he didn't join movements. So he got interested in, the religion of anthroposophy, organic farming, organic education. We know that he read about Eastern religions. but he was never 2 feet into any of those things. I think he was at his heart a very humanistic person. And I think all of his designs and his interest in connecting with nature has to do with nourishing the humans. And, you know, after he passed, he left his body to science, which I think is also just, it shows that he was this incredibly humanistic person and wanting to help people. And a lot of his design is very people-centered. Like, you know, his late in life partner, a woman named Miriam Phillips, was left-handed. So he made things that took that into consideration. And it always seems to start with the person.
It's pretty remarkable. We have a lot to learn from him today. So our last question that we have is about a small stone building that was near the studio, perhaps maybe a spring house. What happened when the wooden addition was added? I didn't see that in the photograph.
Holly, do you think that might be the woodshed?
Well, if it was the stone, there is a stone, there's kind of a stone vestibule underneath the tower addition. It's a little bit difficult to describe. It's even discombobulating when you're there, but he actually had a vestibule that he took the top off of and he put the tower addition on top of it. The other possibility, Julie mentioned the woodshed, which is also in proximity to the studio, which we still have just as Wharton had it.
Great. Did he, this is another question coming in, did he and Russell Wright have any connections?
Not that we are aware of. Do you know any different, Holly?
Not that I know of. Yeah, I wouldn't say none, but not that I know of.
I'm actually really curious to know more about his Louis Kong connection and that relationship. I think it's so incredible that your site has architecture by a very prominent architect.
Yeah, and Ting, we're very excited to begin sharing that structure with the public. What we know is that the two men, though they were very stylistically different. Wharton used to say anyone can draw a straight line. It's when you draw a curve that you have to start to think. And Kahn's buildings really don't often incorporate any sort of curves or decorative elements, but they were both approaching their work without concern for recognition or money, but for the joy of it. And they would always often both change their designs on the fly and continue the creative process once the project got underway. So they enjoyed one another.
Yeah, they're absolutely great friends. We have letters that Wharton wrote to Miriam Phillips about Lou Kahn's first visit to the completed workshop, because of course Wharton had painted it the colors he wanted it. And you know, Lou Kahn and Ann Ting come driving up Diamond Rock Hill Road in her red Volkswagen Bug, and it's fall, and they're just, everyone's so excited, and the colors of the fall leaves are blending in with the sort of salmon color that he painted the building, and they're all just so excited. And he says this really wonderful thing. He says to Miriam, he says about the fall, he says that God puts his plants to sleep in glory, and I think it's the same with old age. So just completely ecstatic over his time with Lou Kahn.
I think we have time for one more question. So I'm going to combine something that I was curious about with a question that came in through the chat, that sort of our family-oriented questions. Curious about what it was like as a child living on this site, growing up with these parents, and then later in life, what was his relationship with family as he moved into older age?
Well, it's from the photos we've seen, the kids had swings outside. There's a kiddie pool that he built for them. It seems that one of his early studios was a barn that was right next to Sunnycrest, and he actually found that it was kind of noisy with the family around, so he went up the hill to get away. But I just connected with someone who had spoken with Ruth Esherick about a visit that the children had to the studio before the floors were put in on the second floor, and that Wharton had strung hammocks up between the rafters and let the kids sleep in the rafters. So evidently he liked fun with them, although I think he retreated as well.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to close us out real quick. Thank you so much for joining us today. This event is brought to you by the James Castle House and a City of Boise's Department of Arts and History, which oversees the Castle House, along with the Historic Artist Homes and Studios program and the Wharton Esherick Museum. I also want to take a time to thank all of our staff, the staff at the James Castle House, who helped bring this program to life, for Valerie, to fearlessly commit to this program for a second year, and to the Wharton Esherick Museum for offering us just an amazing and remarkable look into the life and creative spaces of Wharton Esherick. For those of you anxious to start planning your own road trips, definitely check out the Historic Artist Homes and Studios Guidebook, which is available online at the James Castle House, along with many other online retailers, including many other HAHS sites. This virtual guidebook shares 256 pages of stunning images, artists, and site stories, all grouped by US region, which actually makes it almost impossible to drive past any one of these sites. A recording of today's event will be made available online in the coming weeks, so definitely look out for that. And stay tuned for our upcoming virtual road trips starting next month. And thank you all so much.
And Rachel, can I just add one more plug? If you love what you hear about the Wharton Esherick site, we have another series coming in May, Home Improvement, through a collaboration with the Florence Griswold Museum, where their colleague Emily will be discussing more on May 20th about the upcoming plans for reinterpretation and campus planning. And you can find more information about that in coming days on the HAHS website. So we hope we might see you again for Wharton Esherick 2.0.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.